Hey guys, today we're going to be building a blog in Gatsby where the blog posts are generated from Markdown files. So we currently have 3 Markdown files, and obviously they get rendered on our home page and they're represented as individual blog posts as they should be. The actual images are fluid images, which is the reason why, I don't know if you saw that, but they fade in because a low quality image is loaded first, and then when the normal quality images are ready to be loaded, they go in to replace the low quality images, and they'll have a little animation between the transition, and that just greatly increases the loading of our web pages. And as you can see, it does it there as well. And yeah, so all these are generated automatically, all the blog posts, just from a single template file for the individual blog posts. And as you can see, I'll show you another one. And yeah, because of Markdown files, we can include bold text and underline and links, etc. As you can see, there's a link and there's italics. And also, it's not really that relevant to this tutorial, but the design is responsive, as you can see, just in case you're wondering. So if learning how to create this interests you, then keep watching. So here we are in a new empty project folder. I'll go to the Gatsby Hello World starter to install a new Gatsby project based off of this Hello World starter, which is the most simple starter. It's the one that gives us the most freedom. And in a new terminal in this project folder, I'll copy the command to install the Hello World project, and I'll replace the name of the project with a dot so that it installs in this exact folder. Okay, once it's finished installing, I'll launch up my source code editor of choice in this project folder. I'll be using VS Code for this tutorial. Obviously you can use what you want. And the first thing that I will do before I do anything else, I will go to the package.json file and I'll give it an actual name. We'll say Gatsby Markdown blog. You can close this now. Next we will go to the source directory and we'll create a new directory. We will host our images here, and normally we'll host our images in static, and those files will just get hosted, will get sent straight to the browser. But because we want our images to be fluid images, we do it in the source directory, which is where everything gets compiled. Ultimately, when we run Gatsby develop, and I've already got the images, so I'll just reveal it in File Explorer, and then I'll just paste it in there. So this should now appear. With this, we'll need to create a layout component, and this will wrap every single page of application. And as I said, it's a component, so we'll create the components folder like that. Inside we'll create it's called layout.js, and I'll use a React code snippet, which is an extension, by the way, in case you're wondering how I just did that. That's an extension, and all it will do is just display its children, so everything in between its opening and closing tags, all that will be displayed inside of this element. And another reason why we're creating this, well, really the only reason, is because we want to create some global styling that will be added to this layout component, which in turn will wrap every single page, so that every single page will have the styling in this layout component. So we'll create the styles folder right now inside the source folder, and we'll just call it global. And the first thing that we will do inside the global styling, we will need to go to Google Fonts. We'll get the Poppins font, and then we'll copy this import. We'll import both the regular version, which is that one, and we'll also import the bold version, which is it's got a weight of 700. We'll import it like so. And once you've imported, we can actually use it. So in the asterisk, which is stars that will apply to every single element, we'll increase consistency between all the elements, like so, and then we will apply this Poppins font, unless of course it fails to load, in which case we use sans serif as a alternate font. just in case the pop-ins doesn't work for some reason. Next, we'll create this container class, which will just center things in the middle of the page inside a container. So I'm pretty sure these types of classes are in every single CSS framework like Bootstrap, etc. We're just creating our own version right now. And in addition to that, we'll also remove the default styling that browsers automatically add to links ourselves. For example, it automatically makes it underline and makes it blue. Well, we don't want that, so we'll set the text decoration to none, so it won't be underlined anymore. And we'll set the color to inherit it from its parent. Okay, so we'll now go to the layout component, and as promised, we will actually import that styles. So styles global.css, and that's all we need to do. We'll just import it like so. And then in the layout, in the index page, which is obviously the default page, which is on the home root, we will import that layout component. And we need to get it from components. Currently, it's the only one that's been created. So we will wrap all of our content with its opening and closing braces, tags, opening and closing tags. And inside we'll say hello world, and we'll know that this is working based on whether this text is in Poppins and not the default font, which is Garamond, I think. So inside a new terminal, we will say Gatsby develop to build all of our static sites and press enter. On completion, we'll get to localhost URLs. We'll get the first one, the non-GraphQL one. I'll paste it in there, and yeah, we get hello world. So as you can see, this is in Poppins. I can just tell because I know Poppins, so we know that things are working in this case. Okay, what we'll now do, we'll now create the Markdown files. It may seem a bit early to do this, but just for the brevity of this tutorial, I will create it now so that before you can get on to doing the styling and stuff, you've actually got some content to render out. Again, I've already created these Markdown files beforehand just to save time. So I'll copy them in there, and I'll show you the structure of them. So the structure of them is, we've got this frontmatter data. This title is the title, it's the truncated title. It's truncated because it would be too much to actually display on the card, which lists all the blogs in order by date. Again, the date is what's called a Unix timestamp, and again I'll just show you how you can create that. You just go on a website, pretty much any of these will work because they'll give you the Unix timestamp, and you just type in your enter date and time, and then you can press convert, and then it gives you this number. You can paste it in there. And this number is useful because we can order the posts by this number, and then that will simply list the post in order of date, because obviously the lower this number, the older it is. And I'll show you later on how you can convert this number into an actual date that's readable. And then the image is a relative path, so 2 full stops and then /, so that goes up a folder, finds the image folder, and then the image of choice that's related to this article that we want to show. The slug is just the file name without the MD, and we'll use this later on in the article template to target the Markdown file that we just clicked on and that we want to read in full. And obviously the description is the text that gets displayed below the truncated title and the post listing, and it's simply just a snippet from the actual document, from the actual article, which is everything down here, and this is all Markdown. Again, I won't go into Markdown syntax right now, but these are links, etc. Markdown syntax can be found out on your own, just very simply. And this is bold, I believe, and this is underlined, because remember, Markdown syntax, although there is no dedicated underline syntax in Markdown files, it doesn't really matter because all Markdown files support HTML, and that's actually what we'll be rendering them as eventually anyway, which is how we'll get them rendered out as an actual website. because we just pass it into HTML. And yeah, so this is italics, I believe, 1 star. So anyway, that's the format of the Markdown file. Just post in the comments box below if you didn't understand that, but hopefully you did. What we now need to do is add all the Markdown files and all of the images into Gatsby's content mesh, so that we can actually query all the data and read all the data in our actual compiled static pages when it eventually comes time to compiling them. So what we'll do, we'll close down our local server by closing down the terminal that ran git develop. Alternatively, we could have just quit out of it by pressing Ctrl+C, and then we will install this Gatsby source file system, which allows us to add files to Gatsby's content mesh, which we can query. We can query everything contained in the content mesh using GraphQL. And what we'll now need to do in our Gatsby config file, which is the reason why we closed down our local server, where our static files, our static pages were being hosted, is because we can't, every time we change this config file, we need to restart the Gatsby develop command to rebuild everything and then host it again. And what we'll do, we'll create an instance. We need to create these instances to tell the file system which files we want to add to the content mesh. So this one will be blogs, and that will be obviously in the blogs folder. So add everything, all the Markdown files in this folder, or just all the files in general. But obviously you've only got Markdown files here. So add all the files there to the content mesh. And then we'll create another one as well for the images, because we also want to add them to the content mesh as well. So we'll add it like that. And just adding these files to the content mesh isn't enough. We actually need to be able to parse the Markdown files as HTML code, and to do that, sorry, that's the wrong one, we'll go to Gatsby transformer mark, and we will install it, because this allows us to parse the contents of Markdown files as HTML, which is what we want. So we'll install this, and once installed, we can simply copy the configuration that we need to add. We'll copy it like so. Can close this. Make sure that you get everything copied correctly, and also whilst we're at it, we will get the Gatsby image. What I think they're called source plugins. What these are, and that's not it. So I think it's called again, all the links to these will be posted in the description box below. Yeah, so it's this one. So we copied. There's quite a lot to install here, but these are all for the fluid images. You know, the ones where it blurs in to increase, or sorry, decrease the time for our static websites to load. So we'll install it like that. But I've already installed it just to test it out beforehand. So I don't need to install it again, but you will obviously. You'll need to install that, and then we will actually copy this here, the configuration that we need. We can just copy it straight in like that, no objects needed. And what we'll now do is we will restart we'll rebuild everything with Gatsby develop, because we've changed that configuration file, but we now finished changing it. So we can rebuild and rehost everything on our local server again. And instead of going to our home page, static page, we'll instead get the GraphQL URL, and we'll copy that here. So we should now have, thanks to the Gatsby transformer source plugin, we should now have the or Markdown remark query available to us, and this will allow us to query all of our Markdown files, which we should have access to, because we linked it up in an instance. So we said, you know, get all the files as nodes in the Gatsby in Gatsby's content mesh, so that we can query it with GraphQL, and to order it by date as we promised that we would. So we'll go to sort instead of filter, and then we'll say fields, what field that we want to order it by. Well, we actually have access to the date frontmatter field, and then we'll say order, that will be in ascending order. And as for the actual Markdown files, like they're called nodes, the individual files in Gatsby's content mesh. They're called nodes. The HTML is the body of the Markdown file, and that will be rendered as HTML as promised and as signified by the actual name of the field. And then frontmatter, these are all our fields. If you remember, slug, title, they didn't come from nowhere. These are actually the name of all the different fields in the frontmatter, and so is image. But image obviously is directory, which is why it's displayed as something a bit different from all the other ones, which are just standard strings. And we have access to the child image sharp, which is thanks to the fluid image source plugin, and this one will render it as a fluid image. So that's how we'll get it like that. And obviously the actual image that we get back, we can change all sorts of things like aspect ratio, whether it's in grayscale, etc., or that kind of stuff. But for now, we'll just make a query here, and we should get back the content of our Markdown files in HTML, along with image information and all our slugs, so like the full title, slug, title, everything that we created. You should recognize all this information. If not, then you'll need to go back into the Markdown files, but I won't hold your hand. You can figure out where all this comes from on your own. The purpose of this was to test things out to see if they work, and from the results that we're getting back here, they do seem to be working. So what we need to do on the index page is we need to import GraphQL from Gatsby, and we import it typing in the name for it. Actually, we'll close down the develop server with Control-C. As you can see, we're now out of that now, and we'll just delete the terminal actually, because it's going to cause errors if we do this with the local server being hosted, because remember, Gatsby needs to recompile everything, even if we make even the slightest of changes. So with that imported, we will make a GraphQL query like so, and we make a query using what's called tag template literals, which are actually string methods. Again, I haven't got time to explain it now, but this is legitimate JavaScript syntax. And actually, what I forgot to do was I forgot to copy the query, but I've already got it here anyway. So let me just explain. So basically, it's the same as the query that we had before that I already showed you on actually GraphQL. But essentially, we say query fetch your block. This doesn't really matter because we're not using query variables. So we don't actually need. Technically, we could actually get rid of this. You know what? We'll just get rid of it actually, just for the sake of. But what I'm saying is, you can actually give it a name if you want to. But you don't have to unless you're using query variables, which we're not currently. And as I said before, we're filtering it based on ascending order. We're getting everything back. The only thing that's different from what I showed you in the GraphQL query is that we've actually had a parameter inside this method, which gets back a fluid image, and we're saying placeholder blurred, because by default it doesn't blur. The images don't blur into focus when the images are fully loaded. But which is the reason why we use this property to make it have that behavior. And now that we've made this file, this GraphQL query, and we've exported it, we can go back to the functional component that's in the same file, and it will automatically be assigned to this component's data property, so we can get access to it like so. And what we'll do is we will extract all the necessary data. So we'll get access to all the nodes, and remember that's where the properties come from, because that's the first one, and then that's the second one, and then everything that we need, as you can see just by this highlighting, everything that we need is sandwiched within nodes. So that's where that comes from. And we're not going to do anything fancy in terms of styling. We're literally just going to render things out. Just so that you get a feel, just so that you know that things are actually working as they should. What we'll do, what we'll just say, we'll say blogs, actually, we can't really render out the HTML content for the moment because we can't just render it out like, you know, just by writing it out. But what we can do is we can get the front matter and we can get, we'll say get the full title. So we loop for every single one and then we render out the full title. Okay, I can't put a semicolon there. But anyway, that's just an experiment to see if things are working or not, and to see if they are, we'll run the Gatsby develop command. Okay, once everything's been built again, we can get we go to port 8000 again, and okay, we're getting unhandled runtime. Oh yeah, because it should be blog, sorry, yeah, because it's the individual one, and then, yeah, so that, okay, that's where that comes from. But anyway, we are now getting this back. Okay, we're getting some stuff here, but as you can see, it is actually working. These are actually the correct full titles that we created in the actual Markdown files, so we know this is working now. This is good. Sorry for that mistake. So now that we are able to retrieve the Markdown data, we will style things up a bit so that they are, so that we can actually list out the individual blog posts in a presentable way. And the way that we will do this using CSS modules, so that we can keep things encapsulated. And this is for a page, so we'll create it in a pages subfolder of the styles folder. In CSS modules, they have that module prefix, or they have module anyway in the actual file name. Because remember, even though Gatsby is static files, or it uses static file generation to actually render out the website, it does once the static file has been fully loaded, including all the scripting for the React, it will actually operate and navigate as a single page application, which means that we still need to use CSS modules if we want to keep styling for the different pages encapsulated from each other, so that one page's styling doesn't affect the other pages. We'll only really create two classes inside here actually. One will be for the header, which just says Luke's blog or whatever. And the other one will just be, we'll add on to the container class that we can make the container class flex, because it's not flexed by default. So we'll give it some margin, but there's more margin on the top than there is on the bottom, and no margin on any other sides. We'll increase the font size a bit, so that needs to be 2.5. Another class as well, because remember they all need to be classes when we use CSS modules. And then we'll say wrap, so that things will move on to another row if there's not enough room on the column. And then 16 pixels margin bottom. Again, and remember the way that we actually apply this, we set import all as styles, so we give the import an alias, and then we can get access to it like so. And then, so to actually apply it, we'll have to say class name styles.header, and that will auto generate its own class that's unique to where this CSS module is being used. And what we'll actually do, we'll wrap all of this in a section, and then we'll close it off after the loop has actually ended. And then we'll say, not only will we give this so what we need to do is we'll need to both give it a container class and also the blogs class, and we do it like so. And then to join this array together to a single string, we use the eponymous join method with a space to separate them out so that we can apply multiple classes, because remember, multiple classes need to be separated by a space. So as you can see, this is now actually in a container class. Whoops. This is actually in a container class, so it's looking a lot better. Obviously that's not even close to being what it's intended to be, what the final result is meant to be, which is the reason why we're going to create a new component, but we do it in a folder so that we can encapsulate, so that we can associate a style sheet with it as well. And then we say blog post.js, this will be the actual component file. We use a code snippet to create it like so. And then we do the same for the CSS module, and then we'll import. We'll do the same trick. from the CSS file, and this file will render out all of the Markdown post listings. So it will have, you know, the picture, the title, and a bit of a description. And then when you click on these blog post things, it will take you to the actual place where you can actually read the article in full. And back in the index file, we will import the blog post so we can render it out instead of what we're currently rendering out in the loop. So again, pretty simple how that works, and we'll pass in. So first of all, because it's being rendered out in a loop, we need to give it a key that's unique for each item that's being rendered out. So we just pass it in the index, so it will be unique. And in addition to that, we will simply pass in the iterator, so the current item that is being looped through, and we'll get access to that property like so. Sorry, data. Yeah, that was what it was. So we get access to it very easily. And what we'll do, we'll style some of this. Post container, we'll need to create this class obviously, and it's a width. We'll say what we want is there to be 3 columns per row. So obviously, you know, 100 divided by 3 is 33.3 recurring. Well, we can't get recurring, but we'll get pretty close to it. So it won't really make a difference up to that level. I mean, there it is. And then we'll create the actual post, and this will be sort of another container class. We'll just apply it now, you know. So we'll say div. Again, it's quite tedious doing this, but it's a good learning experience if you're a beginner. Obviously, if you're an expert, then you can just skip these parts. But if you're a beginner, then learning how to do basic styling like this could be quite beneficial. And what border radius does is that it rounds the edges off to make them smoother. And we'll give it a box shadow as well. Again, these are all good design choices. So 3 pixels horizontal offset, 3 pixels vertical offset, and then 3 pixels blur. And then the actual colour itself will be black with 0.3 opacity, which is the reason why we use RGBA method, because the A stands for alpha. And the background colour is a very light grey. Padding will have 10 pixels all around. And then we'll create some more classes. The post image will be obviously self-explanatory. I should also mention now that again, all these classes are written in camel case, so that we can actually use them on the styles import. Because remember, you won't be able to use hyphens, because we can't have hyphens in variable name, in or property names or anything like that in JavaScript. So it's the reason why we use camel case instead of, because oftentimes classes in CSS are, yeah, they're written with hyphens, just like these property names are. So your text transform, it's actually called kebab case, I believe. We don't use that for the reasons that I just mentioned. So margin 0.5 rem on the vertical, and yeah, so we use cursor pointer on everything that will have a link wrapped in it, because by default Gatsby Links, you'll see more in a second, but Gatsby Links are actually their own components and they don't have that effect by default, so we need to add that effect, which is added to links. And that's where obviously the cursor changes to yes, the cursor changes to the pointer to indicate to the user that they can actually click on this link. What we're doing here is we're just increasing responsiveness. So instead of having 3 columns per row, when we get to smaller screens, medium-sized screens, we're only having 2 columns per row, but the rows themselves will obviously retain the same width. And then when we get to really small, we'll just have one column per row, like so. So because otherwise things would be far too squished if we had more than one column on a screen with as slim as that. So what we now need to do, as mentioned before, we'll be using Gatsby Links so that we can link to the other pages, and the other pages will load in the single page application style where the page doesn't actually reload. So we'll import the link component like so. And where will the links actually go to? Well, we want there to be an individual link for each article that's being rendered out. And it will start with blogs. That will be the part of the link that's the same for each blog article. The part that won't be the same is what we'll concatenate onto the end of that, and that'll be the slug. So that's the part that will make the link unique for each blog post that we actually have. And inside, another thing that we actually need to import, because to render out the fluid images, we'll need to do it in a component. And remember, we are getting back the images of fluid images as I showed you beforehand. So we import like that, so we get IntelliSense auto-completion, because that's it's very easy to make careless mistakes there when you're writing that out. So we write it out like so, and then what image do we want to display? We do that with the image property, so we get it from the frontmatter, and then image, and then child image sharp, because remember I use that method, and then get by image data. Very important that by isn't capital isn't a capital B. In addition to that, we will include some alt on that as well, some alt data. And we'll say data dot title, and that will just be some metadata essentially. Doesn't really make a whole lot of difference. Oh yeah, and one more thing actually as well, we'll need to give it a class name, and it will take in our post img class like so. I don't know what's going on there, so I shouldn't really be messing with this now because you've already waited for quite a while. And so yeah, that's what needs to go there. Actually we don't need, sorry, this doesn't actually require a closing tag. It can be self-closing like so. After the link, what we need to do is we will write out the date. So we'll say data dot frontmatter dot date, and then below that we'll create another link, and that will actually be exactly the same in terms of where it will go to. So we'll just copy this here, because you can either go to read the actual blog post by either clicking on this header, which we need to create, or by clicking on the image. So as for the header, we will create the relevant class like so. Well, not create, but we'll use it. Post title. Well, again, there it is there. And then another one, paragraph. And then we'll give this the relevant, and obviously this will be the description. So again, this should be good now. What we'll do, oh yeah, we're already rendering out. So what we'll do, is it already? I think it's already underdeveloped actually, yeah, but it should have crashed a couple of times because of the changes that we made. So it seems to be working now, so we'll just go back. As you can see, we're getting everything back. The problem with this is this date isn't formatted, but other than that, things are looking pretty good. As you can see, our effort has actually paid off. What we'll do to solve this is we will create a function called format date, and this will turn that number, the Unix timestamp, into something that we can actually read, that's human readable. So we'll create a new date based off of what we passed into it, but times by 1,000, because this date object in JavaScript needs to take in milliseconds, not seconds, and that's what the date currently represents. It's the seconds after January the 1st, 1970, but this needs to be the milliseconds after January the 1st, 1970. That's just the Unicode standard. Sorry, not the Unicode, that's something else, the Unix standard, sorry. And then we use the toDate string method to turn it into something that's human readable, and then after this we will just simply return new date, like so. And then with this, we can actually use this method. So we'll copy this, and we'll use that method. So format date, and then we'll just paste it in like so. And with that, hold on, we'll get an error. Actually, no, sorry, it wasn't an error. Sorry, that was just because the method name's wrong. Again, easy mistake. Sorry. Oh yeah, I'm also getting this as well. I don't know where that came from. I've got honestly no idea. Your guess is as good as mine. But yeah, that's looking good now. This is what the toDate string method returns automatically, and it's fine, but we want to get rid of the day of the week, so like Wednesday or whatever. We don't want that. So what we'll do, we'll split it up like so. We'll split it up every white space that we meet, and what we will instead return, we will return, I believe, the month first, and then the space, and then we'll return, no, I think it's the day, yeah, the day, and then the month, and then the year. I think that's the format that we're going with. Obviously this is all down to your choice, but that's what it will look like. Yeah, and then as you can see, it's the format, and it's, yeah, so not only is it ordered based on time, but it's also ordered, but we can also read it as well. That's good. Obviously clicking on these will take us to an error page, a 404 error page, because obviously these routes haven't been created, but as you can see, we're also getting the images to load in as well, which is good. So we made progress on a lot of this. We now need to use a template to generate out all of the actual blogs, all the static files for all of the blogs that are linked to here, so that when we click on the blog postings, we can actually go to a page where we can read the blog in full. So to do this, well, first of all, we need to close down our develop, because we're going back to configuration, so we can't have this running whilst we're configuring things. And what we'll do, we will create a file just in our root, and we will call it Gatsby node.js, and it's called that because this will actually run in a Node.js environment during build time, so that we can do things that change the way that Gatsby is actually building out the static pages that it uses. So the first thing that we'll do, we'll create this method and we'll export it so that it's actually used. And it's an asynchronous method because we'll be making a GraphQL query in it. And we do that with this GraphQL property that gets passed to this method's argument. And we also have access to actions. Actions allows us to do things like create pages and stuff. You'll see more about that later on. So the first thing that we'll do, we'll extract data from a GraphQL query that we'll make, and this one actually uses it's a normal method inside of it's a string, and that string will be a query. We use the or markdown remark query like we always do to get access to all of the markdown files as represented by nodes, and the only thing that we'll get back is the slug property of each markdown file, like so, and that will now be assigned to data because you've awaited to it. So with this, so with data, we will loop through the array, which should be contained in node, sorry. Yeah, and this needs to be node, not node, because that doesn't make sense. We're looping through nodes, so we're getting back each node for each iteration of the loop. And so now, for each iteration, we will use the create page, not create pages. That's something, I don't know why it says create pages, because that's actually not the method name. we'll use create page method. And what page we actually create? Well, the path will be blogs slash, because remember, actually that needs to be slash. Essentially we're just copying the format that we used here. So slash blog, and then what came after? The slug. So we have access to the slug through data, which we're now looping through the nodes of data. So actually wait, sorry, yeah, this needs to change actually. Yeah, it says blog here, so that would cause an error. Sorry, that's very good actually that I got that I caught the error, because otherwise that would just be an inconvenience later on. Because it actually didn't match, even though I said that it did, but it does now. And then the component, so we haven't actually created this component yet, but we will do. And the component needs to be linked to via an absolute path, not a relative path. So the way that we can easily construct an absolute path is we import using a common JS syntax, because that's what Node.js uses. We import this path dependency that comes with Node.js just by default, and then we call a resolve method on it. So it's inside the source, so inside the root directory, which the path method, the resolve method will automatically give us. One link to source, and then templates it will be found in blog template.js, and we'll just create this now just in case this confuses you. So inside source, we'll create this now just in case this confuses you, because we haven't actually created this file yet, so we'll create it now. And this will be the page that will render out. We'll change this actually. This will be the page that renders out each article in turn. And after that, what we want to give this page, we want to give this page the slug, so that it can make its own query. It can make its own query to find the Markdown file that it's meant to be rendering out, so that it can display the article in full. And so that's it for this file. We'll now just write out some dummy data inside this template to see if things are working or not. And again, we'll run Gatsby develop just as we always do. Okay, we could go back to our localhost, see if this is working. We'll refresh. And now if we click yes, we actually get to select back now. So as you can see, because it's working, because it's generated out the 3 routes that it needs based on the slugs. If we go to something else, as you can see, it won't work because that doesn't correspond to a slug in any of our Markdown files. So that's the reason why it's not working. As you can see, what we now need to do is simply render out the actual Markdown, so it's not too complicated. Oh, actually, I should probably mention that because this is a page, we will need to use that layout component that we need, because we said that it needs to wrap all of our pages to give us some label styling. So we will wrap it in that now, and whilst we're at it, we'll create the local, the module for this template file. So the CSS module. So we'll create it like so, and then we will link to it. Very simple, as we always do. Import or as styles from styles, and then templates, and then yeah, like so. And what we'll do in this file, what we'll need to do is we will actually make the GraphQL query to get back the data for the Markdown file that we are meant to be rendering out. So obviously we need to import GraphQL, and whilst we're at it, we'll also import link because we'll need it later on. And we'll actually move that. We'll make it inline, so just so it's nicer. So that we can make the query down below, and I'm just going to copy this in because this video is already way too long and you should already understand it. So remember before I said that we don't need to name our query. Well, we do now because we are using query variables, as specified by slug, and it uses the syntax, it uses the $, and it's of type string. And you might be wondering where we get this from. Where we got this from. Well, we got it from here. Context, we see we gave it slug, so slug will have the value of the actual slug from the frontmatter, which is the data at the start of the markdown files, and then the actual, instead of using or markdown remark, we are just simply using markdown remark to get back a single markdown file instead of or markdown remark, where we get nodes, and nodes is an array that we loop through. Well, markdown remark, it doesn't have that. It doesn't have nodes because it's used for just getting back one markdown file. And the way that we filter it out is very simple. We filter it out by frontmatter. The frontmatter slug field has to equal, which is what EQ stands for, slug. So get back the markdown file when that condition is met. And then as for what we should get back, that's what all this is for. Get back everything. The image has some extra properties compared to what we used before. Its placeholder is the same as before, it's blurred. Transform options means fill, which means fill its container. And match these widths. These widths and height will be the widths and height of the container, which is the reason why they're the ones that we're using. And as with before, we get access to the data like so through its data property. And again, also like before, we will extract the data that we need like so, because we don't, everything's contained inside the markdown remark. And just to test things out, see they do work, we say blog.frontmatter.title like so, because remember we both had title and full title, and we'll check to see if everything's working. Well, we did get 2 hours, but this was the warning, so hopefully we'll see. As you could see, we're getting individual titles based on what we're actually going on, so this seems to be working in this case. Great, it's now time to style everything, and present everything as how they should be presented. This will simply be a back button, so it takes the user back to the home page, which is the reason why we have a link. And then as for the as for the text inside, that will be as such, and we'll give it a class which we haven't created yet, but we'll create shortly. Okay, I don't know why I didn't get. That was a bit weird. I don't know why I didn't get auto closing tag, but it seems to be working now. And as with before, we will import to get the fluid image. To get the fluid image being displayed, we'll need to import the relevant component. So that's Gatsby image like so. And remember, I won't make the same mistake as before. Hopefully not anyway. Can't promise anything. Where I didn't make it self-closing. And we'll just copy this because this video is already. I am aware of how long this video already is, but remember I already explained that before, how that works. Along with this, we will set the alt. The alt is we'll set it to be the title. Along with this, we'll use the styles main img. Again, haven't created that style yet. And we'll also create another. See, I got a closing tag there. That's weird. I'm not entirely sure what's going on there. Remember, the container comes in the global styles, which is the reason why we're not using the module to style that. This will be the full title, not the actual title, which was just for the actual listing to make sure that it actually fitted within the blog post listing. We'll get that style as well, and we'll leave out the actual rendering of the Markdown file for now. So we see what this looks like. Hopefully it hasn't crashed. We'll just, yeah, so as you can see, we are getting stuff displayed, but yeah, it's not exactly amazing. So we'll start all this real quick. Again, you can skip all of this if you already think that you are a CSS acumen. Then props to you, because CSS is consistently ranked by developers as the hardest thing to use. Well, so at least in webdev anyway. I don't know about anything else. Well, I mean, hopefully I know about other things. Hopefully I know about the Renaissance or ancient Rome, whatever, you know. You would hope that, but basically I don't know anything else. Sorry. I don't know what I'm talking about, to be honest. Talking absolute rubbish here, but this is what we have to do, and this is what we have to do in webdev. It kind of drives you insane, because it's just very fast moving, and there's just a lot of stuff to learn, and again, it's not easy, webdev, but you didn't sign up for this. I hope you didn't anyway. I hope you know what you're signing up for before you embarked. And chances are, if you're watching a Gatsby tutorial, I mean, Gatsby, to even start learning Gatsby, you already have to know React and React and GraphQL. So it's not like you're a beginner. I mean, you might be a beginner, but you won't be a just starting out learning HTML, CSS, and JavaScript anyway. And by the way, this is how we get a very thin line break. We remove the border and just set it to be 1 pixels. And we will leave it at this for now. Actually, no, we won't. We'll just paste this in because it already taken too long. So we set this to be 300 pixels, the image container, and that's just to, I'll just show you real quick. So as you can see, 300 pixels, media query is met here, and that's just to shrink the image, just to make things look good. As you can see, not exactly a very complicated design. As for rendering out the actual article content itself, we'll do that with this div here, the div that I just created. And then this is actually a React property, dangerously set in a HTML. Just ignore the dangerously part, it doesn't really matter in our case because Gatsby makes things quite secure. Yeah, so where will you get the HTML content? We'll get that from blog, of course, and the HTML like so. And as for, okay, we need to style this obviously, so we will do, just real quick. So if we go back, yeah, so we normally get an error, but as you can see, we're getting text displayed here now. The text that is being displayed doesn't have line breaks, and that's because, I don't know if you saw at the start, but basically line breaks in Markdown are represented by \n like that, and that doesn't correlate to HTML. That has no relevance in HTML. So what we'll need to do is we need to essentially replace each of those instances of \n using JavaScript's own replace method, which is in vanilla JavaScript, which is why we can use it straight away. And we will use a regular expression g-flag to find every single one of them, not just the first instance of \n. And what we replace it with, we'll replace it with br, an actual line break. And so now we'll use HTML instead. Boom. Quickly get that in. As you can see, we're now getting line breaks. One more thing, these are meant to be links, but we can't even tell that they're links, and that's because of what we did in the default style sheet is overwriting the links that are meant to be rendered out. So we'll just copy this. As you can see, what we're doing is we're just overwriting all of the links, but only the links inside the HTML render, which is, you know, being rendered out through this dangerously set in HTML property, which is a default React property. And so now if you refresh, as you can see, they look more like links, and we can click on them and everything's looking good. So yeah, guys, this is it for this tutorial. I know that this is a long one, but I hope you benefited greatly from it, because we learned all of the basics of Gatsby. We learned so much. If you never learned Gatsby before, this was amazing. Well, hopefully anyway. I don't want to blow my own trumpet here, but hopefully it's a good tutorial for you, because it got you learning the all of the basics of Gatsby. You know, content mesh, source plugins, GraphQL, Markdown, the rest, you name it. And you also learnt some basic styling stuff as well, basic UI design. So I hope this is beneficial to you. If you have any queries or comments, then please don't hesitate to post them in the description box below, and I'll be sure to answer them to the best of my ability. Likewise, I put in a lot of effort into making this, so I would really appreciate it if you considered liking and subscribing. But anyway, what's more important is that you have a great day, and peace out.